Hello again and welcome to another edition of Shed Talk, my weekly magazine video series looking at the keeping, breeding and showing of cage birds. With a particular focus, as always, and those of you that regularly watch the show will know that it's on the exhibition style budgerigar. Although, in this episode we will go outside and in fact we will start by looking at the Fifes outside. We will also have a look at the final two breeding cages in here and see how the youngsters are getting on, you know, virtually weaned, and see if we've got any more news on the cage 6 nest box as well. And finally what we will do in this episode is there's a little bit of maintenance going on inside the shed, so we'll have a look at what that means in terms of the month of August. Yep, it is, we're in August already. Right, what we will do is we'll go outside and have a look at those Fifes. So I'll look at the Fifes then, and we'll begin by the cage that's behind me, cage number 1, and in there, so we've got two youngsters in there plus the parents. Now the two youngsters, the two chicks in there, are feeding themselves reasonably well, so I am, you know, confident that I could remove the parents from this cage. Indeed, when one of the chicks, there's still one that just gives that little caw when one of the parents is feeding itself, and the parents chase it off. So I am confident that they are feeding themselves. So why am I leaving them in there? Well, you might remember, those of you who have been watching the channel for a little while, in my very first year of breeding the Fifes, I moved the parents a bit too, or I moved some chicks a wee bit too early, and I lost one of them because it wasn't feeding itself. And that sort of, I suppose, has meant that from that time on, I have been really probably overly cautious about making sure that the chicks are fully weaned. So I'm going to give the parents and the chicks in this cage probably about another 3 or 4 days before I take the parents out and put them into the main flight, and then just leave these two chicks in here so I can keep an eye on them and try and identify whether there's any cocks or hens in terms of that final pair in there. The first pair that they brought, or sorry, the first round that they brought up, another two chicks in the cage below, they're developing reasonably well. You might remember they were quite heavily feather plucked when I first moved them. The feathers are growing back reasonably well. They look like they've got all their tail now, and all their wings and all the feathers and stuff have looked like they've all grown back. So it does give me a chance to start thinking about assessing these two, and in the next episode we will get these two out, pop them into a show cage, and have a quick look at them and see what they look like in terms of comparing them to the standard for the Fife. Right, so that's the first of the pairs. So like I say, coming to an end again here. They're regularly getting baths, and it's just routine maintenance now with the Fife breeding cages in cage number 1 and the first round that we bought that they had. The cage number 2, the parents in there are now back in the main flight, and we've just got the two youngsters in there. I did say I would separate them if there was any major bickering, as I have done with the first round of pair number 1. There is a little tiny bit of bickering going on when they're feeding, but they settle it down quite quickly. So what I do when I'm feeding them, I have a finger dish that contains some tonic seed, and then I have a small coffee dish. Those of you that watched my keeping the cost down video will know that I use the tops off of coffee dishes to feed the soft food. So I have one of those on the bottom. They both want to initially start on the tonic seed, so there's a little bit of to and fro when I put the tonic seed in. However, it soon settled down that one feeds on the tonic seed and one feeds on the soft food, and then they swap round. once one's had its fill of the tonic seed, they sort of swap round. So so I haven't separated them. I haven't put a wire separator in there. I am keeping an eye on them to see whether I can identify cock or hen. I can't at the moment. These two were feather plucked, you might remember, when they were first hatched. The feathers on the body have all grown back nicely, tails less so at the moment, but I'm hoping, as with the pair in cage that we had, the first pair from cage number 1, or the first round from cage number 1, these two in here will also grow all of their tails back, and we won't have any major problems with them. They are getting, so all the cages, well, yeah, all of the cages now, along with the baths, about twice a week, shall I say, they get a show cage attached to the outside of the cage. Now, in order for me to, sorry, one of the youngsters in this cage is, when I've got the door open as I'm filming, the sun's coming through and is sunning himself on the bottom of the cage at the moment, enjoying a bit of sunshine. Anyway, I was saying, so the show cages get hung on to the outside of there in order to try and encourage them to come in. And now I'm getting wet because one of them behind me has decided to have a bath. I don't know if you can see that. That's soaking the back of my head at the moment. Anyway, so one of the, so I put the show cage on the outside to encourage them to go in and out of the show cage. The water dish, the little top hat water dish contains a bit of broccoli floating on top of some water. Hopefully that will encourage them, as I've done it before. It sort of encourages the youngster to pick at the broccoli through the hole, and they learn that there's water in there as well. The other thing I do is I put a little bit of tonic seed in the same finger drawer that they get in the cages at the far end of the cage. Now I'm hoping that they will recognise the finger drawer as containing the tonic seed, and they will go in there to access that tonic seed, and that will enable them to go in and out. That's the theory behind it anyway, so I'm hoping that will work, and that then means I'm not having to catch them up to put them in the show cage when I want to assess them. Right, so that is it in here. The other Fifes that are in the main flight are all, I need to really go through those now and see which ones of those I want to move on, because I'm starting to get, whilst there's not masses of birds in that main flight, there are a few in there, and I'm keeping them really just for the sake of keeping them. So I will have a look and see if there's any that I would want to move on from inside there. And we're still, of course, waiting on the new zebras to turn up, and I'll talk a little bit more about that when we go back in with the to speak about the budgerigars and how the breeding's going on in there. Right, that's really is just about it from out here. It is relatively sunny at the moment out here out here, although we have got the storm warning for up north. So if you're up north, I do hope you don't have any major problems with the storm that's hitting Scotland in that sort of northern end of the UK. Certainly if you're up north in the UK, shall I say. Right, let's go back in and talk about the budgies. Well, as you can see, we're back inside with the budgerigars. I hope you enjoyed that little look at the Fifes. I will be, trying to get them out and having a look at them in here in the cages, the show cages, as we did with the budgerigars last week. I just want them to, at the moment you saw them, the youngsters, they do look very ragged at the moment. There's no point in, I don't think, looking at them when they're still in that early sort of molt state, and that that they just don't look particularly good. So there's no point in getting them into the show cage to have a look at them. While I'm on the subject then of show cages, every week I ask for people to comment on what they see in the videos. I do encourage people to do that, and thanks for all those who do. Well, last week, following the episode where we got the youngsters out and looked at them in the show cage. There was a comment about, I suppose, about generally showing of birds and I guess other animals, and the comment was about, you know, it not being fair on the birds in terms of putting them in the show cage and just treating them as items, you know, two perches, nothing else in there. First of all, thanks for the comment, because it's, you know, it's a very valid view in terms of the exhibition side of the hobby. And there, you know, and there's massive room across the whole of the fancy for various views on how we keep birds. And you know, there will be some people who think that keeping birds for showing is not ideal. I did comment back and say that the birds, you know, when we're showing the birds, they're only kept in the show cages for the purpose of showing, so they're not in there for any really long period of time. Here in the UK, I think currently the government restrict it to no show is allowed to be more than a day long. I think in Europe they have 3-day shows, so the birds are spent longer in those cages. They are very well looked after while they're in those cages. We make sure that any birds, so particularly in terms of, you know, over in the UK, my own club show, I check the birds when they come in. If there are any that look particularly distressed or unwell, they are put to one side, and quite often we ask them to be removed from the show hall, or I get a more experienced fancier to have a look at them just to see how they are, particularly in, you know, if it's a canary, it would be one of the canary people anyway. So but whilst they're in the show hall, they get plenty of water, and as I say, any that are distressed are moved from the show bench and kept in a quiet corner so they're less disturbed. I would say, you know, that the birds that are shown are bred for showing, and generally speaking they have plenty of practice in the show cage before they go out to a show. So it's not like it's overly stressful for the birds. It can be more stressful for some than for others, particularly if it's the first time they've been out to a show. But we do try and minimise that, and as I say, they're only in the show cage for a short period of time. And the other thing is that most of the exhibition birds are bred for, as I've said, bred for that purpose. So I don't think that. So my own view is that the comments about it not being fair on the birds aren't valid, but it's a perfectly acceptable opinion. My comeback would be, so as I said at the beginning, I think there is room in the hobby for all of us bird keepers, and we do need to be careful, because there are some people who would say that the keeping of any caged bird is wrong. So, you know, the comment about it's wrong to treat them as, you know, and they need to be in large flights. There are some people who will say, even in large flights, that's not the way birds are supposed to be. So, you know, we need to be careful that, you know, banning showing, for example, I think it would reduce the number of birds available, because the vast majority of breeders, particularly here in the UK, breed to show, and their surplus stock become pet birds that you keep in your flights. So banning showing would reduce that, but it's also may lead on to people then saying, well, you know, keeping a pet bird in a cage indoors is wrong, and you shouldn't be doing that, and only outdoor flights are suitable for birds. And then there would be some people who would say that, you know, okay, we now need to ban keeping outdoor flights, and so on and so forth. So my comment is that, you know, there's room in the hobby for all of us. If you don't want to show and you don't like the idea of showing, don't show. But, you know, there will be some people who will criticise anybody that keeps caged birds in any form whatsoever. Anyway, that's my feedback on that particular comment, but thank you for commenting anyway. Gives me a chance to express my own view in a bit more detail than I did in the comment. Again, for those of you that commented on the actual birds and what you saw, thank you very much. It was all very, very positive comments, and I know most people liked the grey-green cockbird. I like him too, so hopefully I will get him out at the end of the year on the show bench and see how he compares to other people's birds, because until you do that, you never really know, do you? So hopefully I can get him into a reasonable condition for showing at the end of the year, as I say. But yeah, thank you very much for all those very kind comments on those birds. And while I'm on that subject, if you see anything in the, any of the episodes, please do drop a comment. I do try to, well, I certainly do try to answer all of them, good or bad. Right. Secondly, of course, if you enjoy the videos, don't forget to give them a big thumbs up. I think the last video probably had a thumbs down because I think it's only on 96%. So, we take the good with the bad. But thank you for all those who hit the like button. It is most appreciated. And of course, if you're not yet a subscriber, please do subscribe to the channel. There's all the subscriptions help the channel to grow. It doesn't cost you anything to subscribe. Only notifications. Do hit the bell icon. Right, what we will do now, that's enough of me waffling on. What we'll do now is we'll have a look at the final 2 breeding cages in here and see how those birds are looking. So turning our attention to the breeding cage or cages, and cage number 1, which is the first of the 2 that we're going to look at as usual. In there we had a yellow face cockbird that we'd paired to a opaline grey-green hen, and the cockbird was split for red eye, so split for the Eno gene. And you might remember that they had, I think this is their 3rd round that these pair has had, and they've now brought up the final lot of their chicks. In the last round that they had 3 youngsters that hatched and that have now been, all 3 of them have now been successfully weaned. You'll remember in the last episode we moved the cockbird out of here and into the flight, so he's now having a well-deserved rest in there and thoroughly enjoying the extra bit of room that he has in there, on the subject of quality of life for the birds. So he's having an extra bit of room in there and enjoying the flight. So Mum is still in this cage. I was letting her, there was one youngster, the grey opaline that's in there, who was a little bit younger, and she was still feeding that one. Has stopped now, and that bird is now feeding itself. So I will very shortly be moving the hen out of here. I've just given her a little bit of a rest. What I might do is actually drop her down into one of the other cages before I pop her back into the fight, just for a couple of days to a week, just so that she has plenty of time on her own to rebuild up her energy after bringing up all of those babies. Anyway, we have those 3 in there that are hers and Dad's, and one of the outcross that we moved from the cage below. The outcross is the grey-green, and I'm almost certain it is a grey-green, and I know there was some comment that it was a normal green, but if we have a look at the cheek patches, I'm pretty much certain they are the greyish blue rather than the violet colour that we would normally expect if it wasn't a grey. So I'm reasonably certain it's a grey-green cockbird, but do correct me as always if I'm wrong. So that grey-green cockbird was off of the grey hen that we've paired to a cobalt cockbird from the cage below it, and it's off of the blue family, which is one of my better families. So, and that bird is developing quite nicely. Sometimes it looks really, really nice, and then other times I look at it and think, actually, it's not quite got everything, but it's certainly a nice looking, a reasonably nice looking bird, I would guess, but we'll have to see how it develops. I think at this early age there is that period, isn't there, where they start off when they first jump the nest and they're sat on the floor and they're showing themselves to be quite biggish, boldish birds. When they're sat there, they look really, really nice, and then when they first start perching and getting around, they tend to pull a little bit tighter, and I've always said it, they tend to go back a little bit. and then we have to wait then until they start to have that initial molt to see what they might finally end up looking like. But I have reasonable hopes for that grey. Of the others, the other grey in here is the youngest bird that I mentioned. Again, looks like quite a nice bird. Has quite a bit of width between the eyes on it. So that may develop very nicely or nicely. The opaline I'm less sure about, so the normal or the green opaline, I am less sure about. I do like opaline, so I'm always a little bit biased towards them, and particularly I've said it before, the light green opaline is I think the prettiest of all of the opalines, and opalines in general tend to be an attractive looking bird. So I always have to double check myself when I'm looking at an opaline that I'm not just, being that biased because I particularly like them. So I'm less sure about the opaline in terms of overall. The Lutino, of course, that we've got in there. Again, this actually, sometimes when I see it sat on the perch, it looks like it's going to be quite a wide-ish bird, unlike Dad, who's quite a slim, stylish bird. It looks like it might have a bit more bulk to it, so I will keep an eye on that one. It's going to be a keeper anyway because I want to get a few more of the red eyes in the bird room. So, and the only way to do that is to keep most of the youngsters and then feed them or breed them back into some splits, which I will have off of the birds that we did originally have in cage number 2, I think it was, where we had some splits in there. Or actually it might have been the cage below that. So hopefully we'll have in fact I think it was 2 and 4, what am I saying? So I think we've got some splits off of both of those. So hopefully we can put her back into a cousin or a half brother and sister, depending on which bird might suit her best next year. So that would be my my plan for that one, but it doesn't look too bad, that particular Lutino. So touch wood, all going well. These will all be over the next week, 2 weeks. Like I said, I'm going to take Mum out shortly. I'll give them a little double check that they are all okay before I move them into the nursery flight for a bit more, where they'll have a bit more room and be able to meet with the rest of the babies and learn that there is a pecking order. So I will be doing that shortly. The only problem I've had, and I should have mentioned this earlier with this cage, is one of the youngsters, and I'm not sure if I mentioned it before, is one of those birds that likes to sit in the seed dish, and when it sits in there it kicks it all out. I'm not sure which one it is yet because I've not seen it do it, but I come in the morning and the seed dish is completely empty where the bird has cleared it out, and of course it does mean that when I top it up there's a rush from the birds to get down there and feed on that dish. I've now tried to get round that by putting 2 seed dishes in there, so I'm hoping that they will, one of those 2 seed dishes will always stay quite full. It's a real pain when one of them does it. And then if you then put a tray in the seed tray in the bottom, they'll then sit in there and kick all that out. It's just, I don't know. Let me know what you do when you have one of these birds that insists on emptying the seed dish every time you fill it up. So that is that particular cage there. Like I say, going reasonably well. We'll now have a look at the 2 youngsters of the old chap in cage number 6. So moving across to the second and the final of the breeding cages. So this is the old boy, and thanks for all those people again who in the comments said they were really pleased that I got something off this oldish cockbird. So and the cockbird is a cinnamon opaline sky blue that we paired to a normal green. So and we've managed to get 2 chicks so far. You can see them both here in the nest box, and I'm about to ring the second of the chicks. So both chicks have now reached that ringing stage, so all we've got to do now is get them carry on being fed and get them to both jump the nest box and get to the weaning stage, and we'll have 2 final chicks off of this pair. So which would be good news, or off of this cockbird, which would be good news. So the two chicks are developing really well. Mum and Dad are looking after them perfectly well. Dad goes to the nest box to feed them, but Mum's not happy with that, so she will quite often, I'll hear her shouting at him to get away from the front of the nest box. Not sure what that's all about. They never have been an overly affectionate pair, this pair, so perhaps it's, you know, she's not happy with him going in there, that's a certainty. Anyway, so the like I say, both chicks are developing reasonably nicely, and we've got a perfect example here of how the sex-linked gene works, because you will notice the oldest chick, which looks to me like it's probably going to be an opaline cinnamon. You can see that, and it's going to be a green. You can almost certainly see that. So and the reason I say it looks like it's going to be an opaline cinnamon is the eyes have got that sort of plummish colour to them. The down looks fairly light in colour, not the dark grey of a normal. And if we look at the feet are very clearly a pinkish colour, which gives it that impression that it's going to be an opaline or cinnamon, or opaline cinnamon. And given what Dad is, that would be my expectation. So what does that mean in terms of that bird? It's going to be a hen, because Dad contains two of the genes and has passed on one of them. Mum doesn't, well, as far as I'm aware, Mum doesn't contain any of the opaline or cinnamon genes, and therefore it's got to be a hen, because both, you know, sex-linked gene is recessive. And if you're unsure of what I mean by that, go across and have a look at my introduction to genetic series, where we cover I cover how the sex-linked gene works. The older of the two chicks, the one I've just rung, has the darker grey of the down. The eyes look darker, and if you look at the feet, and I'll try and get a direct comparison of the feet of one of the eldest youngster compared to the feet of the youngest youngster, the feet are definitely that very dark grey colour of a normal. So that bird is almost certainly going to be a normal bird, and therefore my expectation is that that's going to be a cockbird. Right, so that's those two chicks, and that's how that bit will play out. Once these chicks have jumped in the nest box, this will be the last round for this pair before we pop them back in, as I think, you know, this is again the third round for this pair. It wasn't my intention to let this pair go 3 rounds. The first 2 rounds were all clear eggs, but we were lucky, fortunate enough that I didn't remove the cockbird. I've said this before, and you know, we're lucky that hen started laying and the eggs were full. So, you know, one of those lucky bits right at the end of the breeding season. So that's that pair. Like I say, they will be split after this round, and I will have no cages left in here with anything in them, and that will give me a chance to move on to cleaning all of these out, and also looking in here, because I need to begin to think about the new arrivals, the zebra finches, because the zebra finches breed at a similar time of the year, or certainly if you're breeding exhibitions. You know, normal zebra finches seem to want to breed all year round, but exhibition style zebra finches, most people will breed those at a similar time of the year as the budgerigars. Partly, I suspect, and it's very historic thing linked to the fact that zebra finches, of course, are from Australia. So the opposite way round to us in terms of when they're springers. So just that, I suspect, let me know, those of you that breed zebra finches, let me know if that's the case. It's just a throwback from those years when that's their natural breeding cycle, would be in the Australian springtime, our autumn straight winter. Anyway, so that's I need to make room in here for that. I have an idea of where I'm going to, or a couple of ideas of where I'm going to put the 2 breeding cages for the zebra finches. And I just say in here because it might be a little bit too chilly out in the Finch and Fife light out there to be breeding those zebras in the winter months. So again, if you're a zebra finch breeder, let me know. And you know, if you're a zebra finch breeder from the UK or from Europe, whether it does get too cold here to be breeding them outside with Fifes, where there will be limited heating out there. You know, I don't have the heating on massively out there, just enough to stop the water from freezing. Anyway, that's it from the budgerigar breeding. Well, before we go, I just wanted to talk about some other stuff that I've got going on in August in the shed. So the main other bits of work that I've got to do is to begin to clean up after the breeding season. So there are a number of cages that are now empty. They've had an initial clean, so I've cleaned them out and done all that, given them a quick spray of disinfectant. But what I need to do now is really, whilst the weather stays reasonably fine outside, touch wood, is to get them out and give the cages a real good scrub, and do the same thing with the nest boxes. So I'll talk a bit more about that in the next episode and show you how I go about making sure that the cages and nest boxes are nice and clean. The same thing I will need to do with the Fife dishes, so the nest cups that we put the nest in, and of course what I must remember this time round is put them somewhere safe, so I don't have the same problem next year when I'm searching all high and low for them in the bird room, and still didn't find the ones that I put away the last time. So anyway, who knows what happened to those. So I must remember that when I put those away, make a note of where they have gone. So cleaning those out, and then of course the final bit that I'm thinking that I need to think about doing in August, that I've already mentioned a little bit, is think about where I'm going to put the zebra finches when I come to breed those in here. A couple of options that I'm thinking about. One is I could put them next to the budgerigar breeding cages, so basically extend the section there. A little bit worried that the budgies might upset them a little bit. And the other thing I could do is, of course, I could pop them on top of the nappy cages. There's an area up there where I could easily fit two breeding cages for the zebras. So I might have a look at both and see what they look like in terms of where they go. The only problem with the only other problem with them going next to where the budgerigars are breeding is that when I'm coming to clean out the the holding flight for the birds that I either keep in because they're too old, or I'm getting rid of because they are not birds that I will want to use in the breeding team or the show team next year. When I'm cleaning that out, I will be quite close to them, and again it might just upset the zebras if I've got them breeding in there. So currently I'm thinking on top of the budgerigars. Of course the problem with going on top of there is cleaning them out because they're quite high up. Anyway, that's a problem I will have to think about for over the next couple of weeks. Right, as I say, that probably is just about all we've got time for in this episode. As usual, if you enjoy it, don't forget to give us a big thumbs up. Do comment, and of course if you're not a subscriber yet, please do subscribe to the channel. But most importantly, until the next one, do stay safe, enjoy those birds.